because that's just the way he rolls. And Biden's going to have to do everything he can, I think, to keep up with that kind of energy.
Political scientist Wendy Schiller. We have special coverage of the CNN presidential debate beginning at 8 p.m. Wall Street time with a special edition of Balance of Power. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has warned that a war between Israel and Hezbollah would have terrible consequences. White House Deputy Assistant Amos Hochstein says tensions between Israel and Hezbollah need to de-escalate.
At the end of the day, we have to get Hezbollah away from the border because the status quo of October 6th is not possible anymore. So we have to take, there are a number of measures that we've been discussing with both sides that can be taken by both sides in order to be able to bring that calm back. I can't go into the details of what that would look like, but I do believe that it is possible.
Deputy Assistant to the President, Amos Hochstein. We are waiting for more decisions from the Supreme Court tomorrow and Monday. Today, the High Court blocked the Purdue Pharma opioid settlement, restricted the SEC's enforcement ability, and allowed, for now, emergency abortions in Iowa. We're still waiting for rulings on the January 6th convictions and the question of presidential immunity. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, 20 minutes away from the latest numbers, thereabouts out of Nike. Right now we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all pushing higher. S&P up barely. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlotte. U.S. stocks are quiet today with the Dow currently up 12 points. Like you said, S&Ps are a little changed, and NASDAQ is higher by 48. The U.S. 10-year yield at 4.29%. Gold is up 30. Oil trading in the green. And Bitcoin, that's higher by 0.9%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were consumer discretionary and telecom. Consumer staples were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Salesforce and Amazon, while Merck fell 1.6% and led to the downside. After earnings, Walgreens fell as much as 25% to its lowest level since 1997. And in other news, Chewy soared intraday as much as 34% after Roaring Kitty posted a dog image. Wrapping things up, Nike reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney, to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg. Type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
You drive me crazy.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 18 minutes left in today's trading session. Bouncing around here, certainly on the equity trade. Remember, we've just got, today, tomorrow, and then we wrap up the month of June. We wrap up the second quarter, and we wrap up the first half. So kind of interesting to think about that. Heading into what will probably be a pretty much of a mellow week next week because of the July 4th holiday.
I mean, just because you're going to be...
I'm working. I'm working.
Can you give a little preview for what you're doing?
Going to be hosting the Boston Pops. Bloomberg has been involved in it for 7 years. So Remain Bostic and I are going to go to Boston and host it with the Boston Pops. It's really wonderful. The July 4th celebration, so much fun.
Well, we will certainly be tuning in. Before we get there, though...
Yes, some stuff to get to.
We got some business to get to.
We do.
Let's get to Amanda Agati. She's Chief Investment Officer at PNC Asset Management Group, joining us once again from Philadelphia. Amanda, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing pretty well. Do you agree with Carol's sentiment? It's going to be a little sleepy next week on this holiday week?
I think it will be a little sleepy, although we might get some early fireworks out of tonight's debate.
Nice.
That's the thing that's sort of top of mind at the moment. So,
Ooh, well,
let's go there.
Play that out for us. Yeah, what are the fireworks and what does it mean from your perspective as a chief investment officer? And what does it mean for investors?
well, I think really, I don't know that anything tonight is really going to be market moving in nature, but it's so highly anticipated that, today's economic data comes out. It's basically a snoozer relative to what might actually happen tonight. And so I don't think that the market is going to move necessarily on what happens, but it certainly is setting the stage for what we might expect over the next few months. At the end of the day, the market does not really care about who is in the White House. It's really much more about the makeup of control. And so it's a holistic look at what happens this election cycle. But I think tonight will be very interesting for sure.
So one thing that we do know, or we're told, I guess, is that markets are efficient. It's always pricing in future events. And I'm wondering what is priced in your view right now, Amanda? Is it a Biden or a Trump win, or is it a full control of Congress from one party, a split Congress? What's priced in?
I'm not sure any of it is really priced in. I think this election cycle is perhaps the most complex and most uncertain in history. And so it really is anybody's guess at the moment as to what the path forward is going to hold. And of course, it's very polarizing, right? The two candidates are at complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And so we have seen some movement at the margin in terms of companies, industries, et cetera, but we don't have any clarity really on the path forward. So I think it's a lot less about politics and a lot more about the Fab Five, and this concentrated market and the fact that financial conditions continue to loosen up a bit. Those are really, in my view, the key drivers, at least based on where we are at halftime here for this year.
Of some of the dynamic trends, whether it be the consumers holding up, whether it's the artificial intelligence play, I do wonder when you think about investment strategies that really have longer legs. What are they, or don't have longer legs?
I think it's a great question, and it's hard, I think, in this environment to zoom out. I keep talking about one of my favorite asset classes being global infrastructure. Certainly, U.S. infrastructure, I think, has a lot of legs, but I think also global infrastructure does as well. So if you have more than a hot minute in terms of a time horizon, I actually think there's a lot of opportunity over a very extended kind of multi-year period in that area. Of course, many of our investors aren't quite that patient. And so in this environment, we're still very much focused on high quality and quality oriented exposures, both in terms of equities and fixed income. It's just the right positioning for the late innings of this cycle.
What about longer term? How does that view shift for those investors who do have that longer time horizon?
Well, we're starting to kick the tires on some sort of interesting, I will spare you some of the details because it's not fully baked yet, but we're starting to kick the tires on some longer tailed infrastructure type opportunities here. We've started to see some investor flows kind of move in that direction. This year, it's kind of been an interesting technical move that we've seen. And so I think this is just very early innings as it relates to infrastructure. So we're thinking through some creative ways to play that and leverage it, because I think really, regardless of who wins this election cycle, I think that is going to continue to be a pretty dominant theme going forward.
All right, I'm looking at your notes that you sent our producer Paul Brennan ahead of your appearance, and you write that your song of the year is "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" by the Rolling Stones. It's a classic. We all know it. I don't think we have the rights to it, so we can't play it right now. But Amanda, what's going on?
Well, every year we have a lot of fun picking a song of the year. We do this at the beginning of the year, and I thought it was just timely to share that with you at the halfway point of the year, because for as much as I didn't feel like I had a lot of satisfaction and investors didn't have a lot of satisfaction at the beginning of the year, everybody sort of felt kind of angsty and itchy about, what comes next. We're coming off the heels of a torrid rally at the end of 2023. What does it mean for 2024? And we've had so many, I think, existential yet unanswered questions that started the year, and we still don't have those answers. And so I would really like, from an investing standpoint, to get some answers to those questions to feel a lot more satisfied in the second half of this year. I think it'll happen. Time is on our side. If you get that reference as well, but there's a lot to work through.
Wait, are we going to be singing this though by the end of the year, possibly?
Singing this song?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
I hope that we're not. I hope that we're moving on to other songs, and certainly happier times. I do think over the next 6 months, we're going to get a lot more clarity to some of the unanswered questions around, where the inflection point in the economic cycle is. What does the trajectory of earnings growth look like? How is the consumer holding up? Will we get a change of control in DC? Of course, I'm pleading the fifth right now, but we will get hopefully clarity on that. So there's a laundry list of questions, but as we start to get clarity, I think it adds fuel to this market rally. So Carol, I think it could be a strong second half.
Carol, you can sing that song whenever you want.
Which one?
I can't get no satisfaction.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Or any of the songs on Amanda's playlist.
Okay, thanks there.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
I have a whole bunch for you. We've been doing this since 2015. So I can give you the playlist.
What was the song last year?
Last year was an entire album, actually. It was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
No!
Album. Perfect metaphor for recession. Of course, it failed to materialize, but we had so much fun with that one last year.
You just got to watch that one in sync with The Wizard of Oz, which, have you ever done that?
What?
You didn't know about this?
No.
You have to do
Amanda
that.
knows
That's your homework.
What is this?
Oh, it's so cool.
You're going to have to fill me in later.
Yeah.
Mind
no,
blown.
everyone
How did
knows.
I miss this? I
don't know
love
how you
both The
missed
Wizard
it.
of Oz and Pink Floyd. Grew up on that album.
Yeah, you started on the third row of the MGM Lion, and it's just an amazing experience. Am I wrong, Paul Brennan? Everyone's giving me the thumbs up. Amanda,
How have I missed
She's nodding.
this?
She's
We're
nodding.
going to do this together, and then when I come back and talk to you, we're going to break it all down.
All right, we'll be changing
It's
people.
a deal. Amanda Gotti, Chief Investment Officer at PNC Asset Management Group. Thank you so much. Have a good holiday.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 3:53 right now on Wall Street. We are just minutes away from the latest numbers out of Nike. Investors are looking to see what guidance the company provides for the upcoming fiscal year and the innovation that the retailer may have in store. We got Nike ahead of earnings, up now by about 0.4%. We will have analysis of Nike's numbers from Bloomberg's Poonam Goyal, who follows retail for Bloomberg Intelligence. Denim maker Levi Strauss shares plunging now after the company reported sales in its latest quarter that slightly missed expectations, underscoring Wall Street's high expectations for the company. Levi Strauss right now down by 15.7%. Also lower after earnings, Micron Technology. Its forecast disappointed investors seeking a bigger payoff from artificial intelligence mania. Micron is the biggest American maker of computer memory chips. As for the competitive landscape, Mandeep Singh is a senior tech analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence.
Micron is like a monopoly here in the U.S. because if you're not sourcing from outside, you go to Micron. And look, they guided to CapEx going up 60% next year. I mean, a lot of investors are freaking out. What does it do to the free cash flow? But remember, Micron is getting the handouts from the government to invest in these fabs. So that kind of offsets that CapEx increase that they're making. And so from that positioning, I think Micron is in a great position. And obviously, it's a cyclical industry. And you want to get it early in the cycle.
Bloomberg's Mandeep Singh. Sources tell Bloomberg J.P. Morgan Chase is nearing a deal to buy a Manhattan property near its new Park Avenue headquarters. And those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pelletan. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. That's Carol Masser. I'm Tim Stenivek. I'm going to spend, after our program, convincing you to go home and watch The Dark Side of the Moon, Wizard of Oz.
How do I do that?
Well,
do you have to actually put it together?
I'm now understanding there's certain different sync elements to it. Like back in the day.
Is everybody writing you in now?
Back in the day when you had a VCR.
Yeah.
Which I think is how we watched it back in the day in high school.
So would you put the album on and then
Yeah, you don't have the sound of the movie on.
Okay.
You start the album, I think it's on the third roar of the Lion, the MGM Lion.
Yeah.
And everything, it syncs up perfect. It's amazing. It's like, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
How did I not?
I don't know.
Sounds like something totally my brothers would have done.
It's really surprising. It's something you got to ask, ask around, see if people in your universe have heard of this, have experienced
All right, people in my universe, help me.
My instant Bloomberg is like lighting up with everyone reporting that they've been doing this. So.
Well, let's see if
Of course they know.
Are they really?
Of course they know what it is.
Did Matt Miller weigh in?
Amy Morris.
Oh, Amy Morris. Okay.
So it's a fun Friday night in college. She said it's absolutely true. Okay. Hey, another thing that we want to talk about
in our universe.
Or
sort of not.
Well, I mean, universe, so to speak, around New York City.
Well, you know
right?
how we talk about like inflation, prices up, and then we're seeing some weakness in consumer sentiment and some spending down. Well, something big has gone on sale.
Yeah, we're talking about Rupert Murdoch's triplex penthouse. It's slashing its asking price yet again. After listing for $62 million in 2022, the roughly 7,000 square foot apartment in Manhattan's Flatiron has been on and off the market with increasingly diminishing price tags. Most recently, Carol, offered up in April for $38.5 million. Now, it's $28.5 million price is less than half of the initial ask.
That's a big cut. That's a very big price reduction.
It's got to keep going lower for me to be interested in it, I'll be honest.
Apparently 12 qualified buyers in the last 2 months have toured the apartment. They have a number of qualified purchasers, I guess, circling the property, I guess, according to those who are maybe showing it. Spans the building's 58th, 59th, and 60th floors, 5 bedrooms, 6.5 bath. There's a private internal elevator along with a dramatic circular staircase.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bought it about a decade ago for close to $58 million, reportedly.
On sale, guys. Inflation, it's coming down.
You get a triplex.
All right. You get a triplex. All right. Beyond the Bell, starting right now.
The Closing Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close, starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic here with Alex Steele to take you through the closing bell. It's our global simulcast now. Scarlett Fu in the TV studio, Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek in the radio booth as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, including our partnership with YouTube as we parse the most crucial moments of the day. A lower open for stocks, but it looks like, Carol, if this holds, we'll have a higher close for most of the major indices.
Yeah, just barely, right? You look at the S&P 500, kind of an even split here, but little gains overall. Right now, we just had the S&P dip into the red. So, really just trying to eke out a gain, but it looks like it'll be a flat market for the most part.
We spent a lot of our program talking about the implications of what happens tonight when it comes to the economy and when it comes to the markets.
What's happening tonight?
Well, at 9 o'clock, the CNN presidential debate takes place between President Biden, former President Trump. I do expect quite a bit to come up about the economy, especially when it comes to inflation. Obviously, markets will not be open during that time, but maybe we'll hear more about policies from either president.
Policies?
Yeah, economic policies.
Or maybe we'll wait until we get core PCE at 8:30 a.m. on Friday to answer some questions.
But we all know what that's going to look like. We've been, have our pencils out doing our calculations, right?
Yeah, but don't we also know what the debate's going to be like? Come on now. It's just going to be the show. But what I do think is interesting, guys, tomorrow and the second quarter, first half of the year, sell the winners, buy the losers. I don't know. I think that there could be some liquidity that comes in tomorrow. That could be exciting.
We've seen that rebalancing going on right now over the past week as a lot of people, have some big winners that they have to sell, maybe take some profits off the table. The question is, where do those profits go? Do they pile back into equities and continue this rally, or do they go somewhere else? Screen across the screen here on this Thursday afternoon. Modest gains to be sure, but I think some investors will take it. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now up about 0.1% as we wait for these numbers to settle. The S&P 500 up by about a similar amount. We should point out at one point in the day, in the intraday, it did trade above its record high. It is going to close below that, though, on this day. The NASDAQ Composite up about 53 points, or 0.3%, while the Russell 2000, that's your outperformer on the day, guys, up 20 points, or 1% even.
All right, to the S&P 500, we'll continue there. 284 names to the upside, actually gaining some ground today, Scarlett. 217 to the downside, 2 unchanged.
All right, let's take a look at the IMAP, which shows us how the different sectors are performing, and a pretty mixed showing here. REITs have now climbed to the top, gaining 0.9%. Consumer discretionary, also big gainer, and that's really on the back of Caesar. And communication services up about 0.75%. On the flip side, you've got consumer staples, and that's dragged down by Walgreens, healthcare, another decliner, although it's paired some of its losses because of CVS. Interesting that CVS and Walgreens are in different sectors. Materials and financials also lower.
All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers. So here's some outperformance, folks. Maybe investors giving up a little bit on the chip sector here, but if you look at something like a Salesforce or Palo Alto Networks, really some outperformance. Salesforce up almost 4% in today's session. You see this among the top gainers in some of the major equity averages. Move on to Palo Alto Networks, also a gainer, up about 5%. So just some sector rotation going on here, not necessarily any specific news on these names, but nonetheless, really some outperformance there. BlackBerry, how about a blast from the past there? This went up at its highs almost 17% in today's session, finishing the day with about 11% gain. Yes, it's a $2 a share stock. About
Is that Canadian or U.S.?
U.S. Oh, Canadian dollars? I don't,
Wow.
All right.
I thought you knew that by now, Carol.
Rude, Romaine.
It's a $1.5 billion stock. I'm assuming that's in U.S. dollars.
It's in dollars. It's in U.S. dollars.
It's in U.S. dollars. Thank you very much. Rallying after the company reported first quarter revenue that came in ahead of estimates. CIBC upgraded the recommendation on the stock, noting that the better than forecast print and conservative but achievable second quarter and full year guidance. So they like that. Should point out Raymond James and TD Cowen, lowering their price targets on the stock. And once again, just reminding everybody that is U.S. dollars. McCormick, something completely different. This was a top gainer in the S&P 500, up about 4% today. Spice Maker, of course, reported second quarter adjusted EPS exceeded the average analyst estimate. Company's net sales also came in roughly in line with Wall Street expectations. All right, so yeah, some really big outperformers there.
Okay, you got the outperformers, I got the underperformers. I do want to start with shares of Micron Technology dropping after the forecast disappointed investors who were looking for a bigger payoff from AI mania, down 7% today. Fiscal fourth quarter sales will be $7.4 billion to $7.8 billion. The average analyst estimate was actually $7.58 billion. Some projections were above $8 billion, so it showed how investors had really high expectations for those numbers that came after the bell yesterday. We did see also shares higher by about 60% going into the print yesterday. So again, investors had high expectations. We did see profit come in at $1.08 per share versus a projection of $1.02. Walgreens Boots Alliance, biggest decline today, going all the way back to 1980. Shares falling by more than 22%. It's actually now trading at levels last seen in 1998. The company slashed its guidance due to a worsening retail environment. It announced it would close significantly more stores. Its new CEO is looking to turn the business around. In addition to shuttering locations, management said it would make more organizational changes without specifying if there would be further job cuts. The company has had a rocky few years with turnover in the executive ranks. It's been a challenging retail climate for the company. Shares falling by more than 22%. Also on the decline today, Levi's shares at one point falling the most ever, though closing at their worst since 2023, falling 15.4%. The company did report quarterly sales that fell just short of estimates. Again, high expectations. Shares were about 40% higher through yesterday's close before these numbers came out. So investors certainly had high expectations. Revenue coming in at $1.44 billion in the fiscal second quarter versus the average analyst estimate of $1.45 billion. So just an ever so slight miss there. Sales in the Americas were strong, fell short in Europe and Asia, Alex.
Yep, and also denim's like having that big moment, so that those expectations were high. Let's go to the bond market for a second, guys. We saw a pretty strong bid, yields lower. The big news, though, was we got through a ton of supply this week. The 7-year actually went pretty well today, and then headed into tomorrow with the PCE, personal income and spending. I should point out that the BlackRock iShares long bond ETF had almost $3 billion in inflows on Monday. So you have to wonder what the positioning is like headed into the numbers tomorrow, plus the end of the quarter.
All right, guys, you know how we like to kind of get a good read on consumer sentiment. Sometimes it's like whether or not people are spending money to go to the movies. Well, having said that, it could also just be a sign of whether or not something is kind of good. And that brings us to a most-read story on the Bloomberg terminal. Kevin Costner's, his $100 million Western headed for the box office. And apparently, right now, the estimates are that maybe it might bring 12 to 20 million in over the weekend.
Did he learn nothing from Waterworld?
That's a good point. But before Waterworld,
Dances with Wolves.
Yeah, Dances with Wolves did more than $400 million in revenue. It was a $22 million production. Yeah. So, and he's been working on this since 1988, Alex. He actually put $38 million of his own money into the movie. So if he doesn't get sales up, could be hard to recoup the investment.
I'm actually intrigued that he took this on his own, and it really kind of shows you just how the economics of Hollywood are kind of lopsided here. But I mean, look, I mean, if you like westerns or you loosely like Kevin Costner, I mean, I guess I don't know. I haven't seen the reviews on this thing, but
50% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, exactly.
Not good.
Not
50,
good.
5-0.
Not good.
Yeah. Well, also having the words Chapter 1 in the title is not encouraging.
Also, like, literally, didn't he make this movie? Like, I understand Dances with Wolves had a different premise, but, like, I mean, he made the movie, right? Like, that already happened. I don't need to see another one with Kevin Costner.
He really likes this genre.
He likes, I mean, right? Yellowstone, right?
Really
that was
well.
so popular. He's not coming back for the last season, but it's really kind of interesting. So we'll see. Something to see over the weekend. What do you guys got?
Okay, so we're looking at Fisker. So this is really interesting also. So you can buy a Fisker car, right, for about $70,000 in EV. Now, that company has since gone bankrupt, and that's creating a lot of problems for some of the buyers. For example, you can trade it in. One guy traded his $70,000 almost new car in for $23,000. If you want to get your car serviced, it's really hard to get somebody on the phone because you don't go to a traditional dealership, and because they're in bankruptcy, they let a lot of people go. That's rough.
Yeah, after sales service is always the problem, right?
Yeah. And it's not just Fisker. I mean, you saw the same thing with Polestar, and you've seen, I mean, even with Tesla, you've had some of these complaints here. But it raises the question, at least for those companies that aren't well established, like a Tesla or a legacy automaker, if you're buying one of these cars, you really are kind of taking a gamble that they're, going to actually be around, in 2 or 3 years when you really need them.
Yeah, I talked about this actually with a friend on Saturday who I saw over the weekend. He has a Rivian, and I asked him his thoughts on it. He said he loves it, but he's a little concerned that it might become a brick one day if the company doesn't survive. That was before the $5 billion infusion from VW, but it's certainly something that's on the mind of folks who have EVs from startups, no question.
Yeah, it's a really good point. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, we call it the closing bell. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week on this... Wow.
It's
June
Thursday.
27th.
I know.
How did we get there already?
Listen, it's been kind of, I know, exactly. And here we are heading into, or almost to a holiday week. But it's interesting. Our big focus, no doubt about it, we've been talking about it several times with our Joe Matthew and David Gora, the CNN presidential debate. It is, of course, tonight, and at 9 p.m., President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump will take to the stage. President Biden at the podium on the right, former President Donald Trump at the podium on the left. Biden, as you know, 81 years old. Donald Trump is 78 years old. They are the oldest major party candidates to vie for the White House.
They may be the oldest, but crucial to either of their victories is the support of young people. That's where Lucille Wenigema comes in. Lucille's co-founder of Headcount, a nonpartisan nonprofit that, in its own words, harnesses the power of music, culture, and digital media to register voters and inspire participation in democracy. To date, Headcount has registered more than 1.25 million voters and has worked with musicians such as Harry Styles, Olivia Rodrigo, Ariana Grande, and more. Lucille, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we understand that youth participation is crucial when it comes to all elections. We also understand that youth participation does not always show up. Turnout was up considerably in 2020 over 2016. There are concerns, though, that turnout will be down considerably this year. What's your view? What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to frame the conversation. You mentioned 2020. That was actually a record-breaking year for young people. So the most registrations for young people and the highest turnout ever, like in recorded American history. So when we're talking about the last presidential election, it was really a record maker for young people. And so if that's what we're kind of touching back to, of course, we're really optimistic, hoping to hit that. But yeah, young people are not super satisfied with the choices ahead of them, not necessarily just because the folks are older, but on a variety of different sort of issues and approaches. And so a lot more of them, from what we're finding, are focusing on other parts of the ticket. So things that are a little bit closer to home.
So does that mean when it comes to the presidential vote that they'd rather say, I'm out, and just look at other things down ballot or different issues to vote on and just kind of back off of who might be in the White House ultimately?
I wouldn't say that they're backing off. I think they're really just assessing the options, right? I think they're looking the same way that we are, and there's some time between, now and November. As y'all mentioned, there's a debate tonight. They're really looking to hear maybe if there's something new there, something that they haven't heard, something about that dynamic that might kind of move them forward. And for young people, it's really more about participation, right? Who is going to kind of move the needle forward? And of course, the president is a big part of that, but it's not just the presidential, right? It's even just here in New York, where I live, there was a local election for a few congressional seats, and then there's, of course, the local stuff. So I think they're really conscious about everything on the ballot, but they're really kind of watching to see what resonates with them.
I do also wonder, is a younger voter willing to do a vote against someone rather than a vote for someone? Like, I wonder, just what's in the psyche of a younger voter. I don't know if you guys have done any polling or like in talking with, the younger voting group, if you will. Like, I just wonder, is there kind of how they approach it?
Yeah, for sure. One of the really beautiful things about Headcount is we're kind of all over the country. We've got over 60,000 volunteers, and we're all talking to young people sort of day in, day out about what they're thinking and sort of where they are. And young people are both something and against something, right? Like they're making all the kinds of choices that we are. By and large, young people are quite hopeful, right? They want to see the change that feels possible for them, not just in their neighborhoods, but nationally as well. They're really linking domestic issues to international issues and being really thoughtful about that. I think there's a lot of conversation about, maybe protest votes or anti-votes instead of being pro something. And of course, that's definitely a topic of conversation. But I think young people are savvier than we give them credit for. They're consuming a lot of media in different ways, different forms. It's not necessarily, the 3 cable networks that, some folks grew up with. They're getting their inputs from a lot of different places, but it doesn't mean that they're not tuned in. It doesn't mean that they're not watching. They're just watching it a little bit differently and making their decisions that way.
I'm wondering about where Gaza fits into this. We spent a lot of time when school was still in session covering the protests that were taking place at college campuses. And one thing that we realized was, as these were ongoing, is that even though there were lots of visible pictures of young people protesting the administration's policies when it comes to its support of Israel and what Israel was doing and has been doing, when you actually poll these voters, it's not necessarily in their top 3 or 4 issues that they're concerned about and that they're going to vote on. And I wonder if you see that when it comes to young people in your experience, that they're more interested in the economy, in inflation, than they are in foreign affairs.
Yeah, I would say that that tends to come up for us as well. And young people are not single issue voters in the way that most Americans aren't either. Usually there's a whole variety of things that they're talking to us about when we're interacting with them at concerts, at music festivals, community events, all the places where we're talking to young people, both in person and then, of course, with our digital campaigns. At any particular interaction, we're talking about, the economy, which for young people looks like, can I afford to do what I want to do? Can I, should I be going to college? Should I not be going to college? What kinds of, what place should I be moving to? Young people move 18 months, every 18 months on average. So, they're really thinking about, should I be here versus the next place? What does that look like? And that's what the economic questions look like for them. So yeah, I would say that all of the topics that we've mentioned are top of mind. And it's really rare to find any young person that's, single faceted in the way that they only care about one issue. Often it's multiple iterations of this topic. And young people are also not monolithic in the sense that they only think one way about a variety of topics. Right. Sometimes there's a real mix of things based off of their experience.
Lucille, the pandemic, as you know, disrupted patterns of campus voting back in 2020. So have things gotten back to normal?
Yeah, so one thing I also like to remind folks about young people is that they are overwhelmingly not on college campuses, especially Gen Z. Only about 1 in 3 of them are on a college campus. So when we're talking about how young folks are interacting with civics and democracy, oftentimes it's not on a campus. But that being said, we know that young people, a lot of them are back on campus. We're starting to see pretty close to pandemic records there, or not records, but levels of folks being on campus, whether that's living on campus and also social. And then, of course, the local election administrations are the ones that dictate whether or not certain campuses have things like ballot boxes, polling locations, all of that, state by state. And then, young people are really just kind of out and about, right? They're in the places that we tend to talk to them. Like I said, concerts, music festivals, community events. They're really kind of living out and about. For us, we're doing everything from meeting them at dog shelters to at the conventions and everywhere in between. So yeah, they're excited, they're engaged. Obviously, it's summertime. The folks are home from school and doing that kind of summer travel. And then, of course, once we get back to the fall and we're all kind of laser focused back on election work, we'll definitely see more happening on and off campus.
Lucille, just 30 seconds left. We mentioned that you're nonpartisan. We've understood that the younger voters tend to be more liberal and democratic. There are worries from Democratic groups about get out the vote efforts could backfire by getting low propensity Republican voters to the polls. So they're pulling back from supporting those efforts. Do you think voter registration has become too politicized? Just 30 seconds.
Yeah, I definitely agree that voter registration has entered a more political space. Ideally, this is just civic engagement. It's really important to us to continue to be nonpartisan because we strongly believe that every young person should have access to the ballot to express their views and to make the change that they want to see in the world. So on the partisan end, they're going to keep talking about what they talk about. We just empower young people to do what they need to do, which is get across the finish line and get their vote in.
All right, Lucille Wenigema, thank you so much. She's co-founder of Headcount, joining us on this Thursday. Hey, folks, we do want to mention some earnings crossing the Bloomberg. That is Nike. The stock's down about 4% in the aftermarket. Looking at fourth quarter revenue, that was a little bit light, $12.61 billion. The estimate on the street was $12.86 billion. The company also saying it's taking actions to reposition Nike to be more competitive. I look at Greater China revenue, $1.86 billion. The estimate was $1.83 billion. And China EBIT, earnings before interest taxes, $548 million. That too is a little light. The estimate on the street was $552.6 million. We're going to break these down, look a little bit deeper into that earnings report. Again, Nike shares down about 5%.
4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Nike reporting revenue for the fourth quarter that missed the average analyst estimate. After hours, we're watching Nike shares. We're looking at them tumbling now by 4.11%. Whole lot more on Nike coming up in just a moment. Developing story, headline right off the Bloomberg Professional Service. Sources tell Bloomberg Nokia, the Finnish communications company, is said to be considering a potential acquisition of Infinera, that is the San Jose-based maker of digital optical telecommunications equipment. Turned out to be an update today for the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ. It was a choppy session today, but we did see the S&P 500 index climbing 5 points at the close to 54.82, up by about 1/10%. The Dow also higher today by 36, up 1/10%. NASDAQ up 53, a gain of 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.28%. The 2-year 4.71%. Spot gold up 1.2%, 23.26 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.2%, 81.88 a barrel. So again, recapping, stocks higher today. Nike after hours trading lower, down now by 3.9% after earnings. Nike shares are bouncing around. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. You just heard the numbers on the stock reaction from Charlie Pellet. Worth repeating. Nike shares down 4.5%. The company reporting earnings just minutes ago. Revenue for the fourth quarter missed the average analyst estimate. It came in at $12.6 billion. Estimates were for $12.86 billion. I'm also, Carol, looking at shares of Foot Locker, which tends to move when there are big moves from Nike. Foot Locker shares down 2.8% after market.
All right, let's see what Poonam Goyal has to say. She's Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Analyst for E-commerce, Athleisure, Off-Price, Retail, and she joins us following these Nike earnings just out, as we said, down 4%. All right, Poonam, what do we need to know?
The numbers weren't great. Clearly a miss on revenue.
Oh, we're going to work on Poonam's connection right now. She's freezing up a little bit. I do want to give some other headlines here, and we'll get to when we fix Poonam's connection, we'll hit these with her. The direct revenue coming in at $5.1 billion. It was a decline of 7.3%. Carol, estimates were for $5.68 billion. Poonam Goyal, your connection is fixed. We lost you right at the beginning of what you were talking about. You said the numbers weren't good. What else?
Yeah, it's really the breakup in the numbers. So we had expected wholesale sales to be down and digital to be up. It's actually the reverse. So you have DTC down and wholesale up, which means that there is something going on in the digital business, which was down 10% in the quarter. And I'm trying to understand, and I'd like to understand when they get on the call, as to what exactly happened there. Is it that that customer is looking for more innovation and they still weren't able to provide it, or is something else happening in the digital channel?
Yeah, right. It's interesting. Like, is it just design, or the product mix wasn't right, or is there something, as you said, in the digital channel? It makes me wonder about, we keep seeing subtle signs, it feels like, of consumer weakness. Is there something there that's more substantial?
Yeah, the consumer weakness is there, but the retail side of the business, in terms of their stores, didn't do as poorly. So I think it's really something specific to that digital channel. The one interesting thing that you called out earlier was about Foot Locker, right? How it tends to move in tandem with Nike's results. And I'd say here, if you look at Nike's results in detail, the wholesale segment was up. So that's actually
a good
positive for the wholesalers that it feeds into, whether it's Dick's Sporting Goods or Foot Locker. It's actually a positive sign.
Yeah. So because direct revenue was down, can you look at that as a good sign for a company like Foot Locker?
No, you're looking at the wholesale numbers. The wholesale number was up. So wholesale revenues were actually up. They were up 5% in the quarter, and the estimate was for them to be down slightly. Whereas DTC, which is a direct-to-consumer channel, was down 8%, and it was expected to be up 4%.
But I guess what I'm saying is, does it mean that fewer people are going directly to Nike and more are going to wholesalers?
I think they're still going to Nike, right? I think it's a little bit of a different customer. The ones that are going to wholesale aren't looking for necessarily the best product at Nike, because Nike still holds the best lineup of product in its own DTC channel. So my first guess is that there's something with the innovation. There just isn't as much innovation as that customer wants, and they really need to step up efforts on that. We did hear them say that they're bringing out more innovation. They're using their the Air franchise to add more innovation, but it's not enough.
Okay,
they need to do more.
When you're help me out because I'm not a sneakerhead. When you say innovation, what exactly are you talking about? What's the technology that consumers want to see in footwear?
So I think it's the newness, right? If you think about what Nike has offered in the past 3 years, there hasn't been anything completely new, right? Whether it's the Jordan line or whether it's within their basketball line, it's kind of an iteration. So how many, different colors could you have in the Dunks? Like, that's not innovation. We need to see a new shoe. We need to see new product. We need to see new technology. We need them to do more. This is Nike, the largest athleisure company in the world, and there are others encroaching on the space quickly, like the Ons and the Hokas of the world.
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about, I don't know.
I have
Carol,
On Holding, and everybody made fun of me because I had On Holding, but I'm just going to say.
But do you guys remember the Reebok pumps back in the day?
Yeah.
With like the cartridge, the CO2 cartridge that you have in like the handheld?
Yeah.
And you'd fill up your... That's technology. That's what
technology.
I'm talking about.
Well, and I also, it's so funny. We talked with Brad Stone earlier this week, Poonam, the new cover story of the Bloomberg Business Week magazine, now a monthly. But with Bernard Arnault of the House of LVMH and what he has done in the use of social and celebrities. Like Nike's usually pretty savvy about this. So it's not just a case of like marketing. You're saying it's actually just got to be products that folks want to buy.
Yeah, I think Nike still has very, very strong brand equity. They have the best endorsers, especially when it comes to basketball. And it's really just product. We just haven't seen enough product newness from Nike in the last few years. And they've admitted to this, and they are working on it. So I think the future will depend on execution. We'll hear from them on the guidance, which they issued last quarter. But given today's results, it could be altered. So really, we'll hear more on the call. I think the call will be telling.
I'm wondering about one number that sticks out to me is Greater China earnings before interest and taxes. That came in just slightly below estimates because we did see Greater China revenue actually come in above estimates, but we saw them get hit on the bottom line when it came to Greater China. Does that mean that they have to do more marketing to grow there?
I mean, they definitely have to do more marketing in China. China's an area where everyone is investing, and they do need to connect with that customer better, whether it's using local endorsers, which seems to be the right move in that market. But I'd say, when you're looking at those operating results, you're also looking at them not currency neutral. So they had a beat on a currency neutral basis, but on the reported number, there is some currency in there that could be impacting that as well.
Point.
Is there anything we need to know about China specifically? This has always been, a big part of the Nike story.
China actually did really well on a constant currency basis. Their revenues were up 7% for Nike, and that was above estimates of 4.1%. So China's doing well for them, at least at the moment.
We've been spending a lot of our program talking about the consumer. We
Yeah, we
spoke
have.
to the CEO of Denny's today. We spoke to the CEO of Carnival yesterday. Got two different pictures from each of them from the consumer. As we do get more of these retail earnings, Levi yesterday, the expectations were certainly high with Levi's. With Nike today, can we get any sort of story about how the consumer is doing, at least here in the U.S., Poonam?
I think the consumer is still strapped. They are choosing where and how they want to spend. The one thing that's in favor of Nike is all these sporting events, right, that we have coming up and that we have going on. That should prove to be a catalyst for them, and it should stoke demand. Whereas others in the retail space may not have that tailwind and could be pressured by a consumer just being pressured. The unemployment rate has ticked up. Consumer confidence has come down in the recent months. So there is pressure on the consumer.
Hey, Poonam, one thing I want to ask you, you follow the retail space. I follow you on LinkedIn. You've been out doing panels and conversations. I am curious about what you're hearing about the retail environment right now.
The retail environment is tough. I mean, everyone is worried about where the consumer will spend, especially heading into the second half, which is, election time also here in the U.S. So I think everyone's just operating at the edge. There's a lot of competition from the Chinese marketplaces, Temu and Shein, that's affecting how shoppers spend and where they're spending. And we're seeing them gravitate towards value. But retailers are investing. They're investing in AI. They're investing in social commerce because that's where the consumer is spending all their time.
Okay, we got to ask you. I'm going off the script here, but I know you can talk a little bit about this. There was a story in the Bloomberg yesterday about Amazon now going to work on this sort of Temu-like direct-to-consumer from China unit. Talk a little bit about that. We just have 30 seconds left, but how big a win would that be for Amazon?
It's a huge win. I mean, Amazon has to fend off losing market share to Temu and Shein, and having these lower prices, having this section is one way that they can keep the customer on their platform and even get some of those customers that really focus on just low prices to come onto its platform. So I think it's the right move for the long run. They have to, look at what Temu and Shein are doing and really fight them head on.
I was talking to some younger folks, and they're like, that's where they're shopping now. It's really interesting. They said you have to be careful and you have to look at the reviews, but man, that's where they're going. Poonam, thank you so much. We know you're going to track that analyst call. Poonam Goyal, senior analyst for e-commerce, athleisure, off-price retail here at Bloomberg Intelligence. Hey, we do want to mention a headline that crossed. The NFL, National Football League, was hit with about $4.7 billion in damages, which could be tripled under federal law after losing a jury trial over anti-competitive features of its Sunday ticket broadcast package.
Yeah, a jury out in Los Angeles federal court sided Thursday with football fans who claimed that the league conspired with DirecTV to raise the price of subscriptions to watch away games. The NFL and its teams made the unusual decision to fight the consumer class action lawsuit at a trial instead of negotiating a settlement.
Yeah, the big networks, right? They broadcast games for teams in their region, but viewing games outside those areas often require paid subscriptions to Sunday tickets. So fans were fighting back. So there's more analysis, and we'll continue to cover right here on Bloomberg.
Before we get to that, though, let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 Newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Tonight's presidential debate features two candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are disliked by 1 in 4 voters. That is a historically high number of double haters, according to the latest Pew Research survey. Henrietta Trey's is Director of Economic Policy Research at Veda Partners.
We suspect that the people who are going to be swayed by this, according to the latest data from Morning Consult last night, are actually the ones that are younger voters, specifically Black voters and Hispanic voters, who are saying, I'm going to watch this debate just to find out who I'm going to vote for.
Henrietta Trey's of Veda Partners, a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance, and our coverage of the CNN presidential debate starts at 8 tonight, Wall Street time, with a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Television. Now, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has warned that a war between Israel and Hezbollah would have terrible consequences. White House Deputy Assistant Amos Hochstein says a ceasefire in Gaza could help reduce tensions.
The president has been working nonstop to try to get a ceasefire that allows all the hostages to come home and that would practically end this war in Gaza. That, of course, would make things a lot easier to reach a settlement. But it's not an automatic. It's not you get a ceasefire in Gaza and you get a ceasefire in Lebanon. It doesn't work that way. We have to have its own solution in Lebanon. But it is enabled considerably by a ceasefire in Gaza.
Amos Hochstein is Deputy Assistant to the President, and we're waiting for more decisions from the Supreme Court tomorrow and Monday. The court added Monday as an opinion day. Now, today, the High Court blocked the Purdue Pharma opioid settlement, restricted the SEC's enforcement ability, and allowed for now emergency abortions in Iowa. We're still waiting for rulings on the January 6th convictions and the question of presidential immunity. Global news, 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We got Nike shares lower now by 6% after hours. Nike reported quarterly sales that did fall short of expectations, adding urgency to the world's largest sportswear company's efforts to strengthen ties with its retail partners and speed up its product development. Again, after hours, Nike right now trading lower by just about 6.3%. Turned out to be an update today for the Dow, the S&P and NASDAQ. Choppy session, but we did have the S&P advancing 5 points to 5482, a gain today of just under 0.1%. The Dow up 36 points, higher by 0.1%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 53, up by 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.28%, the 2-year 4.71%. Spot gold climbed $29 the ounce today, up by about 1.3%. As for West Texas Intermediate crude, also higher today, up 1.2%, 81.87 a barrel. Tonight on Bloomberg Radio, it is the CNN presidential debate. So what is Wall Street expecting? That question for Amanda Agati, Chief Investment Officer at PNC Asset Management Group, who was interviewed right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, I think really, I don't know that anything tonight is really going to be market moving in nature, but it's so highly anticipated that, today's economic data comes out basically a snoozer relative to what might actually happen tonight. And so I don't think that the market is going to move necessarily on what happens, but it certainly is setting the stage for what we might expect over the next few months.
And you'll hear it all live on Bloomberg Radio. Fireworks begin at 9 p.m. Wall Street time. Yes, again, live here on Bloomberg Radio. Nike, just about the lows of the session after ours. Nike, one more check here, down just about 6.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Well, Bloomberg News reporting late last week that U.S. milk production is starting to get hit by the bird flu virus, which first made the jump to cows earlier this year. Output in Texas and Kansas, the first states where highly pathogenic avian influenza was detected in dairy cattle, slumped in March and April. That's according to U.S. Department of Agricultural data.
That's right, Tim. And earlier this month, fragments of a potentially dangerous bird flu virus that appeared in Austin wastewater miles from the nearest dairy farm are sending researchers in a race to find the source. I have to say, this story has come up. It's come up, and we've talked a little bit, I feel like, on our morning call, or at least it certainly jumped out for me. I wanted to know more. So that is why we are delighted to have with us Megan Davis, Associate Professor of Environmental Health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. She joins us from Baltimore. Megan, it is so nice to have you here. We recently talked with Dr. Anthony Fauci. We didn't quite get to say, what is this something we need to be worried about? But there are certainly things on his radar when it comes to the next global pandemic or something that is going to hit us. What do we need to know about this and how serious it is?
Thanks for having me. I think this is very serious if you are a public health professional and if you are someone who consumes raw milk products or handles animals, especially livestock, not just dairy cows, but this has been a problem in birds for a very long time. We've had recurring outbreaks in poultry. So this is our chickens that we might raise for meat or for eggs, and our turkeys. And so if you're someone in any of these categories, I think this is high alert. For everyone else, I think it's a stay tuned and be aware and use proper handling techniques when you are handling your raw meat, preparing it for dinner.
So if you cook meat according to USDA recommended temperatures, this is not a risk?
You always have some risk with what we call cross-contamination.
Okay.
So for those who do cooking at home, you want to make sure that your vegetables are prepared on a different place in the kitchen than you handle the raw meat products, and that you use proper cleaning or disinfection of, for example, your cutting boards after that. We don't expect that eggs are a huge risk. There's always the potential for a slight risk, mostly because when birds get affected by avian influenza, they get really sick really fast.
Okay.
And so we don't typically see that the eggs end up into our consumer products. Where we do have some concern is in the raw milk. And that's because pasteurization works. It does what it's supposed to do, which is use a combination of temperature and pressure and heat to inactivate things like viruses. And if you're using commercial pasteurization methods, then typically you're going to take care of any virus that might be in that raw milk. So the people at highest risk are those who have contact with raw milk. This could be liquid milk or some raw milk products. So I advise don't drink raw milk.
Yeah, the FDA also warns that unpasteurized milk can pose a serious health risk, but it certainly doesn't stop people from seeking out raw milk for some reason. Okay, so this is good to know that we don't think eggs are at issue if we focus on preventing cross-contamination if we're cooking with chicken at home, and if we buy pasteurized milk, we're in the clear.
As long as you also don't have contact with, for example, sick wild birds. Remember, highly pathogenic avian influenza comes from these wild bird reservoirs. It means that that's where the virus tends to circulate. And this is why we periodically have had outbreaks. Now, what's unusual about our current outbreak of avian influenza, specifically this highly pathogenic avian influenza that's now in dairy cows, is that it's been around for a while.
But it hasn't been in cows for a while, right?
Well, we think it's been in cows since maybe even late 2023.
Okay.
It was identified in March because there were cows on farms in Texas that were sick, and the usual suspects that they were testing for were negative. So they started testing for the unusual suspects and identified avian influenza. So we know that this particular, outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza has been basically getting into mammals not infrequently, including marine mammals, and it's had some staying power. It's been around now since globally, we'd say, late 2020 or 2021, and in the US since 2022.
Okay, so it sounds like I'm thinking, I know families got chickens up the street. I don't have to be worried about that.
Backyard flocks are at risk. Okay. And so certainly people who keep backyard poultry should use a lot of biosecurity and biocontainment efforts. These are fancy words that basically mean you're trying to prevent contact that your backyard poultry have with wild birds that could be reservoirs and carry this avian influenza.
So this is what I want to ask you. It's an urban environment, so it's an urban chicken coop. Like you can pass, the gate. So I do wonder, in an urban environment, are the risks higher?
I would say that it's the same. Okay. What your risk is usually from migratory birds, which can come through on flyways, and this can impact birds that might be in both urban settings as well as suburban or rural settings.
We should note you're a former dairy veterinarian. Yes. So one of the reasons you know a lot about this, in addition to being a PhD and working at the Department of Environmental Health and Engineering at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Okay, if people get bird flu, if a person gets the bird flu, what happens to them and how do they get treated?
It depends globally. So we do see this around the world, and some clades, some strains are more problematic than others. So there have been cases globally where people have gotten very sick and died from avian influenza. In the United States, we've had 4 cases. All of them have been people who are workers on farms. And so the first in 2022 was a poultry worker who had contact with known positive birds. And the other 3 have been since the beginning of the dairy avian influenza outbreak, and they've all been dairy workers. 2 had pretty mild symptoms, conjunctivitis mostly, so that's a bit like pink eye, but one of them did have respiratory symptoms, and we know that it is possible for this to be more severe. So we typically think with avian influenza of things that are in that influenza-like illness group, and so you think about when you get the flu, what symptoms do you have? So it can range from respiratory, clearly ocular, and that's the eyes, all the way to gastrointestinal. So your GI system can sometimes get upset by this too.
Okay, but that sounds like
it's worry about. Yeah, I was going to say what we also worry about is neurologic disease.
Yeah. All right, Megan, thank you so much. Megan Davis over at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. John Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got Nike now lower by 5%. Nike did report quarterly sales that fell short of expectations, adding urgency to the world's largest sportswear company's efforts to strengthen ties with its retail partners and speed up its product development. Poonam Goyal is a retail analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence, and she was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
So we had expected wholesale sales to be down and digital to be up. It's actually the reverse. So you have DTC down and wholesale up, which means that there is something going on in the digital business, which was down 10% in the quarter.
DTC, shorthand for direct-to-consumer. Poonam Goyal is with Bloomberg Intelligence. Walgreens Boots Alliance slashed its guidance due to a worsening retail environment. It also announced it would significantly close more stores as its new CEO seeks to turn that business around. Today we saw shares of Walgreens Boots Alliance plunging. Walgreens today was down by 22.1%. Chewy and Petco Health soared and then quickly faded after Keith Gill, known online as Roaring Kitty, posted a cartoon image of a dog on X. Chewy, which ships supplies like pet food directly to customers, quickly lurched higher by as much as 34%. Petco jumped by as much as 12%, but those rallies proved to be short-lived. With shares of Chewy closed down 0.3%. Petco eked out a gain of just about 0.3%. And denim maker Levi Strauss shares plunged today after the company reported sales that slightly missed expectations. shares of Levi Strauss down today by 15.4%. Those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 Newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. The National Football League has been hit with about a $4.7 billion bill, damages that could be tripled under federal law after losing a jury trial over anti-competitive features of its Sunday ticket broadcast package. A jury in Los Angeles federal court has sided with football fans who say the league conspired with DirecTV to raise the price of subscriptions to watch away games. Last-minute preparations underway ahead of tonight's CNN presidential debate between President Biden and Donald Trump. And we talked with Wendy Schiller, the director of the Tubman Center for American Politics and Policy at Brown University. She says age is a factor in this debate and in the race.
I mean, on the one hand, you can feel pretty happy about life expectancy in America and functionality. I mean, 40 years ago, Ronald Reagan was, pretty old by most standards when he assumed the presidency. So it's not as if we haven't seen this before. Why not somebody in their mid-70s? But we're not even in the mid-70s. We're at, 78 and 81.
Political scientist Wendy Schiller, and we have special coverage of the CNN presidential debate starting at 8 o'clock tonight, Wall Street time, with a special edition of Balance of Power with Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons in Washington and David Gura in Atlanta. You can listen to the debate on Bloomberg Radio or watch it on Bloomberg Television. And we're waiting for more Supreme Court opinions tomorrow and on Monday. The court added Monday to its schedule as a new opinion day. And that means the court session will spill into July. Now, there are 4 big opinions released today. The court tossing out Purdue Pharma's $6 billion opioid settlement, curbing the Securities and Exchange Commission's ability to press complaints before in-house judges, and confirmed it would let abortions take place in medical emergencies in Idaho, at least for now, and blocked a Biden administration rule that would mean stringent new emissions requirements. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Now back to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec.
All right, Amy, thank you so much. A lot going on, Amy, covering it all. We do want to mention a headline that crossed after the close, too. Nokia exploring a potential acquisition of Infinera Corporation, a maker of optical telecommunications equipment. Excuse me. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly.
I approve.
This is according to people familiar with the matter. Nokia has been studying the feasibility of a deal for the U.S.-listed company. According to those in the know, an announcement could come within days.
It has been.
And Infinera has been up about 15% over the last 12 months, giving them the company a market value of about $1.2 billion.
At least 70% of the consideration will be paid in cash. The transaction represents 28% premium to Infinera's share price at the close of June 26. Nokia commits to accelerating its share buyback program.
We continue to watch Nike, down about 6% here. This on a sales miss and a deepening demand slump. We talked with our Poonam Goyal about the product mix, and she wants to hear a little bit about that because the digital channel, I think there was some concerns about. So we'll look for some more clarity when it comes to the call that execs do with analysts.
And one more update on the NFL story that we heard from Amy just now. The NFL was hit with about $4.7 billion in damages. It stands to be tripled, over $14 billion under federal law. This after losing a jury trial over anti-competitive features of its Sunday ticket broadcast package. The most read story in the last hour on the
I was just going to say, it is the most read story, so it's interesting. The central claim was that the league and the digital TV service had an arrangement that allowed them to force viewers to pay for out-of-market games even when their team wasn't playing and charge higher prices. So a win for the consumer and viewers.
Hey, one more story. This is like a roundup.
Where are you going?
I'm looking at Target. It's one of the most read stories in the last hour. They're lowering the threshold to stopping thefts. So they're taking a tougher approach to further curb store theft. Store staff can now seek to halt incidents of theft worth at least $50. That's lower than the previous threshold of $100, according to people familiar with the policy. This according to our own Jaewon Kang at Bloomberg.
So it leaves it for the employees to kind of go after people who are stealing?
Well, if it's...
Or you're saying if you steal something and it's $50...
No, it's staff can seek to halt incidents of theft now.
So it's
like they're lowering the dollar threshold.
All right, kind of interesting, but that's kind of the retail environment that we are living in. All right, guys, don't forget we've got our coverage of the CNN presidential debate here on Bloomberg Television. Starts at 8 a.m. Wall Street time. That's going to do it for Tim and me. Balance of Power starts right now.
politics to the world of business. This is Balance of Power.